Chapter 8. The way I figured, by Monday I'd be an orange. Why couldn't I accept being a blue like the others and play out Otero's game the way he'd set it up? Why think mutiny when I'd never in my life opposed anything, if it meant bringing attention to myself or being in disfavor? Another thing, how could I, the super achiever, resist earning the most points by oppressing others so I'd win the prize when the class ended? It didn't make much sense. Yet the thought of resistance grew and grew in me like a tumor you couldn't control. Adam was away at his family's mountain home helping get it ready for ski season, so I couldn't talk it out with him. We wouldn't see each other until Monday. I knew he'd be gone, but Bettina told me something Adam hadn't. "I passed the math test," she cried, first thing when she phoned Friday. "Isn't that super?" "Wonderful. What did you get?" Her voice dropped, but only for an instant. 69. Then she hurried on, excited again. "Mama says you're to come back next week and tutor me some more." Before I could digest that order, told so bluntly, she added, "We're leaving any minute on our trip to the mountains, so I'll have to run. But did you know about that big party Adam's having Saturday night?" Party? My mind lingered on the way Bettina gave me her mother's news. "I bet Adam didn't tell you. He's got gobs of friends coming to stay over." Adam had invited friends for the weekend? Surprised and hurt that he'd said nothing to me, that I hadn't been invited, I didn't answer. "Aren't you going to ask who's coming?" Bettina persisted. "I have the feeling you'll tell me anyway," I said. Bettina giggled, and I could almost see her counting off the names on her fingers. "There's Melissa and Justin, Eileen and Beth." Eileen? She was the girl Mrs. Tarcher always pushed to Adam. Pretty, bright, from one of the best families. She was so much better suited to him than I. Why was she at his party, staying over, and not me? When I hung up, I didn't want to admit how puzzled and betrayed Bettina's news left me, and the feelings remained. On Saturday, as I toyed with thoughts of rebellion, I not only couldn't talk it out with Adam, but I wouldn't even have wanted to, had he been in town. Yet I had so much need to sort out my plans with someone to hear that my instincts were right, that it wouldn't be a mistake to give up all the power of being a blue for the nebulous hope that I could change things as an orange. I guess, out of this need, I turned to my father, even knowing in advance how he'd likely answer. We were huddled together opposite each other at the chessboard in the living room Saturday night. I told him bits and pieces about the color game and my thoughts between plays. The weather had turned cold, and it felt good to be indoors, where it was bright and warm. The house smelled of Mama's baking, pumpkin and apple pies for Thanksgiving dinner. She was getting ready for the big family gathering when all of us, Grandpa and Grandma, aunts, uncles, cousins, and this year Sue and Hideo, were together. "So what do you think, Papa?" I asked. I'd just lost my bishop to his knight, something that wouldn't have happened if I'd paid better attention. Papa shook his head in dismay, folded his arms across his chest, and stared at me. "When I play chess, I like to concentrate, not talk," he said. "I know, Papa, but this color game is important to me, and I can't concentrate on chess because all I can think about is what I should do." "All right." Papa leaned back and studied me. "But first, I have to ask, are you being honest with yourself? Are you wanting to give up being a blue just for that boy to be with him?" "Oh, Papa!" I cried. "No." "Good. Then I ask, what can you accomplish by losing all that status? You become a social outcast. You'd have all those, what do you call them, G4s down on you?" "Yes, but maybe, with Adam's help, we can organize the oranges and light greens and get some improvement in the way we're treated. It is better, because of who you are, to work hard and be a good citizen and not get into trouble. When you protest, you start trouble." He hesitated, then added, "When I was a boy in the camp they sent us to, it was very bad. We were called Yellow Devils. We were inscrutable. You know what that means?" I thought of Adam's note with the flowers. He had called me exotic and inscrutable. I had considered it a compliment, meaning mysterious. In those days, the word meant sly, sneaky. Such shame to call us that. Papa shook his head in distress, then went on. My father tried to change things. People listened to him. But the authorities got worried. They didn't want trouble. They sent him to another camp, away from us. I'd heard that story and others like it all my life, and they always left me feeling insecure. What happened to Papa was a long time ago. Times have changed. I want to believe people wouldn't let that happen again. Papa, I asked, if Grandma and Grandpa's Hakujin friends had protested to the government during those days, maybe all our people wouldn't have been put away for those years. Ah, Papa said with distaste. I don't want to talk about it. Why? Please, Papa, think about it. Wouldn't it have changed things? It wouldn't have made a difference. We were treated badly because we looked different. The Germans in America were just as much a threat, but they weren't sent away. They didn't look different. That's why. Hideo and Sue think I should do what I think is right, not what's safe. Hideo and Sue. Ah, what do they know? My son has gone to college, and he has married a white girl, so he thinks he knows everything. With more than a trace of bitterness, Papa added, I have lived much longer than your brother. What I know is from experience. What I say is right. With that, Papa returned his attention to the chess set. Papa's reaction helped me decide. Being cautious, being safe, never changed anything. Hideo was right. Papa lived too much in the past, was filled too much with old fears. I was a sansei, a third generation, as was Hideo. While we didn't want to lose our traditions, our strong sense of the past, we couldn't let our parents' old ways and old fears and suspicions taint us. I spent much of Sunday in my room, lettering the posters. All colors unite, each board read. I'd printed the word unite in the 4 colors of the game. It was an odd feeling, quite unfamiliar, to plot by myself what I do, knowing the consequences. All day I buzzed with a kind of happy zeal. While working on the posters, I considered how I'd put them up. It would be impossible to mount them on the walls during school hours without being seen, and without the G4s taking them down immediately. They had to be put up before Monday, so they'd be there for everyone to see first thing. But how? Juan. His name came to me instantly. Juan would enjoy the adventure. It was exactly the kind of thing he'd go for without a second's hesitation. We'll do it tonight, he said when I phoned, delighted with the idea. There's a night watchman, so we'll have to be careful. Wear sneakers and jeans. Pick you up at 8. I felt scared and exhilarated as I climbed the chain-link fence and dropped down to the school grounds. One followed, first throwing me the bundle of banners and posters. Then together, we ran toward the gym, the first place we planned to post, giggling with suppressed excitement. We hung the signs one by one, at the library, outside the cafeteria, next to the Johns, wherever kids would see them. We slunk down halls, peered around corners, whispered and pointed like criminals robbing a bank. It was so easy, we couldn't believe it. And finally, there was only one more place to hang a sign, on the notice board right beside the front office. There's a light on, I whispered, stopping in my tracks some feet from the door. I'll look. Juan moved swiftly and silently, then scrunched down to peer through the glass which covered the upper half of the door. He nodded, then motioned for me to come. Heart pounding, I tiptoed to him, bent, and peeked into the room. The night watchman was seated at a desk, feet up, munching a sandwich and watching a small TV set. Piece of cake, Juan whispered as we grinned at each other. Cool as you please, we taped the last All Colors Unite sign right there, on the glass. Then, hand in hand and giggling, we fled back to the fence, climbed its links, and dropped down to the street, where we ran off like criminals, When we reached my house, we went over every step of what we'd done, praising each other for how well it had gone. As he said goodnight, Juan gave me a quick hug and pumped my hand vigorously. "We done good, pardner," he said, grinning. We sure did. I reached up and kissed him on the cheek. It would have been perfect if Adam had phoned so I could tell him what we'd done and get his reactions. But Adam's weekend must have gone on longer than planned, because he didn't call. I tried not to let myself dwell on it, or the disappointment would take away my wonderful high. I left for school early the next day wearing my armband, like a good blue. The first color game student I met was Gia, a light green. Glancing first at my band, then my face, she bowed. I bowed back. Puzzled, she looked again at my band and bowed a second time. Smiling, I returned the bow. Not quite sure what to make of me, she fell in step behind, as inferior colors are supposed to do. I stopped and faced her. Gia, this is pretty silly. Why don't we walk together? Gia looked around to see who might be watching. You mean it? Sure, why not? Oh, come on. I'll just get reported, not you. She stepped back. Thanks, but no thanks. I shrugged and walked on. Whenever a lower color bowed to me, I bowed back. Mostly I got puzzled and surprised looks, but no one asked how come. I wondered who, if any of them, would be first to report me to earn Otero's precious points. Everyone in school was talking about the mysterious signs and banners that had bloomed overnight. Who had dared put them there? Was a revolution in the making? How would the power structure react? As I passed the main office, 2 dark greens were directing oranges to strip the poster from the glass door and pull down the banners spanning the second-floor balconies. How dare those uppity lower classes do that? One of them said. I guess most people assumed it had to be oranges who had put them up. All through morning classes, my mind was busy elsewhere. What would happen in Otero's class? Couldn't everyone tell by the way I looked how guilty I was? At lunchtime, I took one more step toward demotion. Instead of sitting with the blues, I joined Juan at the light green table. At first, the kids said, "Please go away, you'll just get us in trouble." But when Juan whispered about our Sunday night escapade, there were so many questions and so much laughter that people started turning around to look our way. Of course the G4s noticed, and pretty soon there was Brian behind me. "Aren't you at the wrong table, Amy? What are you doing, slumming?" "Oh, hi, Brian." I smiled brightly at him while my heart pounded in my ears. "Why don't you join us? We're talking about the posters all over school. You know, All Colors Unite." "Those posters are revolutionary. Whoever put them up will be severely punished." Juan was trying hard to keep a straight face. 1 or 2 light greens chortled quietly, covering their mouths to hide their amusement. "Am I missing something?" Brian asked. "Do you know something I don't? Was it the light greens, perhaps, and not the oranges who are to blame? Because if anyone knows, there will be a big reward in points for telling." "Us rebel? We wouldn't think of it!" Juan cried in mock horror. "Light greens are good fellows. All we want is to keep what we've got and not cause trouble." "You realize, I hope," Brian said sternly, "that inferior colors should not be conversing with their superiors." "Oh, that's all right, Brian," I said. "They're not talking to me, I'm talking to them." Brian didn't quite know what to make of us. Most of the kids studiously avoided looking at him while seeming to be holding back giggles. After an uncomfortable silence, he wrote something in his notebook, frowned, and went away. "Hey, girl," Paul Thomas said in greeting as soon as I took my seat in Otero's class. "I've been hearing things. What are you up to, anyway?" I turned around to face him, glancing first to the back of the room where Adam sat talking with an orange. We hadn't said a word to each other since Friday. "Depends on what you heard," I said, wishing Adam would look my way. "Bad things, real bad," Paul said. He leaned forward confidentially. "Seems you've been bowing to all the lowlife. You've been sitting with light greens?" I smiled. "They're my friends, Paul. Some were my friends before this game, and just because some stupid law says they're not anymore, doesn't mean I'll obey it. Gwen, seated beside me, tuned in. Her face took on the look of someone who had smelled something bad. She edged away. The class began before we could talk any longer, and after roll call, Otero started in on the book we were supposed to have read, Black Like Me. It deals with a white man, a well-known writer named Griffin, an educated man with a nice family. He decided to find out if color really made a difference in how people were treated. So he dyed his skin by taking some special medicine and went to live as a black man in the South. What he discovered was that everything changed just because he was black. People didn't care that he was an educated man, well-bred, decent, a published author. All they saw was that he was black. He had to sit in the back of buses and walk for miles sometimes to find a toilet he'd be allowed to use or a restaurant that would serve him. The book was written maybe 20 years ago, and things are better now, Otero says, but blacks still aren't treated like first-class citizens. Paul said, "It's good that a white dude wrote the book, because no one would believe what it's like if a black man said those things." Justin said, "People always want to be superior to others. Look how that black shoeshine guy abused the wino. There's a pecking order, no matter what color you are." I wasn't so sure about that, because I remembered the shoeshine man in the book did put some food aside for the wino. But I didn't say anything. Frankly, I was so scared about what would happen when the G4s took over, as they did each class period, that I couldn't concentrate. And finally, it began. Otero turned the class over to Brian that day to handle the fines and awards. You could actually feel the tension in the class, mostly in the back rows, because they could always expect the worst treatment. My color and the dark greens could sit back and just watch the show. "IRS refunds have just come in," Brian began. "The following people please come up to get your checks. Tony, Gwen, Gia, Mark. Except for Gia, all the names called belong to the higher colors. Carol, we've had some very good reports on you, and have decided to promote you to blue." I glanced back at Carol and smiled. Carol hurried forward, and Mary pinned a blue armband over the dark green. Then she took a seat beside me. "Several people have been fined for late payment of income tax. $10 fines for Cynthia, Adam, Bob. This time, most of those fined were lower colors. A couple more fines were given, sometimes unjustly, and awards, sometimes without being honestly earned. Then Brian said, "It has come to our attention that the people responsible for putting up the signs on campus are the oranges. Would those involved please stand up, or else the entire orange class will have to bear the consequences." Everyone turned around to see what the oranges would do. Adam leaned forward, an intense, angry scowl on his face. Others looked startled, guarded, even scared. Of course no one admitted blame. I felt hot with guilt, shocked that someone else might take blame for what I'd done. "You all realize, don't you, that the state will not tolerate troublemakers," Brian said. "You lower colors have as much opportunity to rise in society as anyone else. If you don't make it, you have only yourselves to blame. It's laziness and stupidity that keep you where you are, nothing else. So let's not see you wasting time in rebellion. Nobody's going to give up their good lives just because you're not ambitious enough to get where they are." His face hardened. "Now, don't hurt your own people, whoever you are. Stand up and admit your guilt and take your punishment. If the guilty person or persons do not stand up..." I jumped to my feet. With the attention centered on the oranges in the back of the room, no one noticed me at first. Then Brian said, "Amy, sit down." "I'm responsible for the posters and banners," I said. My face must have turned scarlet from the way it burned, and the words came out as if I'd just finished running. The room became so still I could hear Gwen gasp, and all eyes fixed on me. Sunday night, I climbed the fence and put up the signs. Brian's lips curled into a curious smile. "You did you? If that's true, you're in real trouble, Amy. But I can't believe it. It's too big a job for one person." Who helped you? Nobody. I did it alone. My face burned and I carefully avoided looking at Juan. No, she didn't. Juan's chair scraped as he leaped to his feet. I helped her. I see. Brian's eyebrows rose in surprise. He glanced first at Otero, then at the other G4s. I'll have to confer with my colleagues for a moment. I stood before the class like Hester Prynne before the townspeople, while Juan and I gazed uneasily at each other. Brian, Otero, and the other G4s whispered for a while. Then Brian stepped back to the front of the room. We're very disappointed in you, Amy. Very. Reports have come in that you've been urging others to rebel, that you've been bowing back to lower colors, that you've deliberately left your own color and conspired with lower colors. And now you admit to an even worse crime, insurrection. Brian shook his head. Of course you know you've disgraced your color. No one of status will want to have anything to do with you. And because of the severity of your crimes and your unrepentant attitude, we have no choice but to demote you to the lowest status. From now on, you are an orange. Of course, you keep your blue band on under the orange because it symbolizes your roots. I let out my breath, relieved to have it over with. Others had been promoted and demoted, but never more than one level higher or lower. It was so embarrassing. It's what I'd expected to happen, even wanted to happen, but now that it had, I felt so strange. My entire upbringing had taught me to bring respect and honor to the family name and my own, and to do it without bringing attention to myself. Papa would be so ashamed. Still, I didn't feel disgraced. Embarrassed, yes, even a little scared. I gathered up my books and walked with head high to the G4 holding the color bands. With everyone watching, I proudly wrapped the orange band on top of the blue. As I walked to the back of the room, I heard Brian shouting at Juan, "You're so stupid, you might just as well be an orange too." "Way to go!" someone whispered as I passed the light greens. Hands reached out to touch me. Ahead, in the orange section, sat a solid row of females, or techs, with the only seat at the end. Without a word, the rows stood up and techs moved right and left, leaving a seat in the middle for me, right in front of Adam. Adam's eyes glowed with pride and love. I took the seat in front of him and faced front, feeling oddly vulnerable. But I had no doubt that what I'd done was right. Chapter 9. You did it for me, didn't you? Adam asked, an arm around me as we left the room together for the first time in weeks. So we could be together. Despite everything you said, you just couldn't stand being away from me, right? Part of me remained tied up in knots at what I'd done, and part of me wanted to stay aloof from Adam, not wanting to be hurt after what Bettina had said. But looking up at his handsome, confident face, I couldn't stay angry. Instead, I smiled and said, "Actually, I did it for me." Juan fell into step beside us. "Did she tell you how we plastered the school last night? You should have seen her climb that fence like a commando. Cool as a killer, man. I never knew you had that side to you, Amy." "Oh, come on," I chided. "If you hadn't agreed to come, I'd never have had the guts." We had fun though, didn't we? Our escapade had created a special bond of affection between us. Adam noticed and turned silent and aloof. I went on chatting with Juan, hoping Adam would get over his rudeness until Juan left us at the stairs. For the next moments, Adam and I walked together without speaking. Finally, I said, "What's wrong?" "You tell me," Adam exclaimed. "What's going on between you and that macho Mex?" "Adam!" I couldn't believe what I heard. "What's with you, Amy?"